Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting. If I could call upon Councillor Sinfield to read the council prayer.
Good evening. Thank you. Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen.
Thank you. And Councillor Franco, if you wouldn't mind reading the acknowledgement of country.
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. The Local Government Act 2020 enables council to hold virtual meetings with councillors participating remotely by electronic communication. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website to enable public viewing of the proceedings, including councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting's also being recorded and will be made available on the council website soon after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered, then the meeting will be adjourned until resolution. However, council is not responsible for any technical difficulties that may be experienced by a member of the community in participating remotely in this meeting. And once the meeting commences, only limited assistance can be provided. So I acknowledge the councillors present on the screen for tonight's meeting. And there are also a number of officers in attendance tonight, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. We'll now move to the order of business as listed on our business papers. And the first one is apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillors Thompson and Watson are apologies this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. Our next item is adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on 24 October 2022. And councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion? So Councillor Galt, to adopt and confirm the minutes. And seconded Councillor Park. Thank you. Is anyone opposed? I can see no one opposed, so I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you, everyone. The next item is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officers. So are there any conflicts to be declared? I believe Councillor Stavrou and Councillor Biggar will be applying for leave of absence in general business. So we'll deal with that when we get to it. Any other conflicts? Thank you. I can't see any hands up. Submissions and presentations, petitions, public submissions, deputations and presentations. Mr. Wee, are there any of those? I don't believe so.
Madam Mayor, through you, there are 3 petitions this evening. There is a petition about establishing an LGBTIQA+ advisory committee, one in relation to removal of car park spaces at Prospect Hill Road, and a third in relation to parking permits to employees of retail around Burke Road.
Thank you. So I think everyone has seen them in our papers. Does anyone have any queries, or is somebody happy to move a motion to receive and note the petitions as printed in our business papers? Councillor Biggar, you're happy to move that? And second, Councillor Hollingsworth? Thank you. Is anyone opposed? There being no one opposed, I can declare that motion carried. Thank you, everyone. And public submissions, I believe there aren't any, Mr. Wee? No, there aren't. Thank you. So the next item of business is informal meetings of councillors. And again, we've read that in our business papers. So is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the record of informal meetings of councillors as printed in our business papers? Councillor Gillies and Councillor Goff? Yes, mover and seconder as printed. Thank you. And is anyone opposed? Thank you, everyone. So we can declare that motion carried. Thank you. Our next item is public question time, and Council does encourage the submission of public questions prior to 12 on the day of the meeting. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there were no public questions received.
Thank you. And again, notices of motion. Mr. Wee, do we have any notices of motion?
Madam Mayor, there were no notices of motion.
Thank you very much. So we can next move to presentation of officer reports. And if I could check with people if they have any particular issues with the order or wish to flag any items for discussion, there is an opportunity to move some on block. There are a lot of them and we've got things to do after the meeting. So can I suggest the following and see if someone is prepared to move a motion as such. So we're suggesting on block could be 7.1, 7.2 and 7.3. They're the shopping precinct business centre marketing and business development papers. Then 7.4 September quarterly performance report. 7.5 amendment 1 Cherry Road. And then there's 3 contracts that could possibly be moved on block. 7.6, which is drainage. I think Councillor Gold, you might have had a question about that one.
I'm happy that it gets moved on block if I can just mention something in general business in relation to that.
Okay, thank you, noted. And the other one is 7.7, which is concrete and bluestone, and 7.9 road resurfacing. Now they're the ones, Councillor Franco?
I have a question. If Councillor Galt is going to comment on one of the issues after the event in general business, it might be helpful to actually hear before we vote on the item what the comments may be, because if they're pertinent, it'd be good to actually hear the comments.
Do you want to quickly let us know what it is, Councillor?
Absolutely. It is not directly related to letting the contract. I don't have a problem with that. It's only to do with future provisions for drainage generally, which could affect the overall cost of the thing at the end of the day, but most unlikely during the period of this contract.
Are you happy with that explanation, Councillor Franco?
I'd probably prefer that to be taken out and then have that discussion and have Councillor Galt raise the issues in the discussion and the question time there. That would be my preference.
Yep, not a problem. Let's take it out. So we've now got 7.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 and 9 as a possibility. Somebody be interested in a motion to move them on block? Councillor Gillies?
Oh, sorry, excuse me,
Thank
Councillor.
you, Chair. I think we had 7.8 in the en bloc proposal as well.
Yeah.
I think you just might have skipped that one when you were running through them in that review.
I think there was thought that maybe we needed to consider it, but let's see what people say. I'm happy for it to be considered as on block. What does everyone think?
Okay. Would you mind just running through the proposal for the en bloc again then, please?
Can we just check with Councillor Hollingsworth first?
Thank you. I have one question with regard to 7.7 to do with Bluestone. So I'd like to have the opportunity to ask an officer question of that one as well. Thank you.
So we'll put that back in.
Thank you.
No, that was 7.7.
7. Thank you.
So at the moment we're looking at 7.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9.
Something stayed in on by request of Councillor Franco.
Oh, 6, sorry. Yep, you're quite right. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9. Councillor Clark?
I'm happy to move the proposed en bloc motion. I wonder if we could, notwithstanding the discussion just then, include the 2 items that were mentioned by Councillor Galt and by Councillor Hollingsworth, on the basis that there's nothing that precludes questions being asked during an en bloc motion, and one would anticipate there's probably unlikely to be any change, so the motion could be dealt with efficiently in that way, just allowing for the questions.
Can I, governance, is that a possibility? We're just checking. Councillor Park, would you propose that they ask them before we move it?
No, I think it's appropriate for the. Well, I'm ambivalent. I mean, I'd propose to move it and then just have the questions asked, but either, whatever suits.
Yeah. Okay. It's been suggested those questions can be asked and answered now. So maybe we'll go to 7.6 first, which was Councillor Galt's question about the drainage. Councillor Franco, you happy for Councillor Galt to ask the question?
They not be dealt with in the en bloc motion. I actually think if they turn out to have any pertinence and relevance to the motion, it becomes very cumbersome, and I actually think it'd just be better if there's questions and issues, we deal with it as a separate item. I'd rather not deal with it as an en bloc motion. If others want to push it as an en bloc motion, that's a separate thing. And as a separate point, I question whether we should put them all as en bloc motions in one en bloc motion, including the marketing issues. I can understand putting them together in one en bloc motion, a separate one for the contracts, but that's a slightly separate matter.
Well, Councillor Park has moved it en bloc. Let's see if we have a seconder for that. Councillor Galt. So let's ask the questions and then see how people want to vote. Councillor Galt, would you like to ask your question in relation to 7.6?
Thank you, Mayor. Simply that since we're no matter how successful we are in abatement of climate change, we have locked in many years of change ahead of us. And one of the predictions coming from that is more intense rain and more frequent rain. And we've seen what more frequent rain has done to the northern parts of Australia in recent months. The question was simple. Have we allowed in our forward thinking within council for making those provisions for more runoff from the municipality? Whilst it may not directly affect the particular matter before us tonight, in the longer term, the cost to us for drainage probably will go up.
Is that Mr. Freer who will answer that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. As Councillor Gold has suggested, tonight's report is in respect to awarding a contract or a panel of contractors to undertake works as part of our drainage network. Typically, these works are developed through a design for a particular location, and indeed climate impacts are considered as part of the design for those physical works and structured works in those locations. Aside from that, we also have a range of other initiatives that we present in our open space areas outside of this contract, where we might have ephemeral wetlands, for instance, or in our Billabong areas and along the Burke Road extension in the north. So there are a range of other factors that are taken into place or considered as part of our mitigation of storms in the city, and that has been identified as part of our climate action plan and open space strategies as well.
Councillor Gold, does that satisfy you?
Absolutely. Thanks very much. Yes.
Okay, and you're happy now with the paper as it is? Thank you. And Councillor Hollingsworth, you had a question about 7.7.
Thank you. Look, I was reading through the documentation to do with the contract awarding, and just a clarification with regard to the ownership of bluestone in particular. So whenever there's any concrete, bluestone and associated construction works undertaken, just wanted to seek clarification that the contractors do not have any ability to take possession or remove the bluestone that is, I believe, obviously of ownership of council, and it's historically valuable but also financially very expensive. So I just wanted to check if there was a clause in the contract to make sure that Burundara retain bluestone, even if it is stored during the scope of works.
Thanks, Councillor Hollingsworth. And I think Mr. Free is going to answer that.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, yes, council does retain bluestone and generally reuses it in the same locations. We have quite a significant store of bluestone from a range of projects across the city, and we reuse that bluestone in projects going forward.
Thank you. And look, that's my understanding. I was just wondering if it was actually in the contract with regard to construction works that obviously contractors have an obligation not to remove as for their own use or for on sale of bluestone.
Again, through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that is the case. Each project is specified individually and designed individually, and where it is identified the removal of existing bluestone, it is either for reuse or we retain that for a future project.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And that satisfies you, Councillor Hollingsworth? Yep. Thank you. So we have a motion, which I think Councillor Park moved and Councillor Gold seconded. Can I see, and I better try to just go through it again. So 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, 7.8 and 7.9. That's my understanding of what the motion is. So is anyone opposed to that?
Can I ask a procedural question? Are we voting to vote on them en bloc, or are we voting as to whether we accept them or not?
I believe we're voting whether they're being moved en bloc.
Well, my motion is that the officer recommendations in respect of each of those items be adopted. That's the nature of the en bloc motion.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Does that?
That's what I believed I seconded.
Yep. Councillor Franco, are you opposed to that?
I'm not opposed to any of the recommendations, the officer recommendations. So if we're voting on the officer recommendations, I'll be voting in support, but I just want clarification as to what we're voting on.
Thank you. Yes, the officer recommendations. So I'm thinking nobody's opposed to Councillor Park's motion. Maybe because it's quite a lot, Councillor Park, do you wish to speak to it briefly before we move?
I don't propose to. I don't think anything will be added. We've gone through it a number of times now as to what it comprises. The matters of the reports are all there ready for public access. If any, there's few, if any, members of the public watching, but the reports are all there, so I don't propose to speak to it, given the significant business we need to get through tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? And I don't believe there's anyone against. Anyone against? No, thank you. So that's moved. So to keep an eye on me to make sure I get this right. I think we're going to 7.10, 7.10, Melbourne East Regional Sport and Recreation Strategy. And I believe that's going to be presented by Andrew McHugh, Manager Health and Wellbeing Services. Thank you, Mr. McHugh.
Through you, Madam Mayor. In 2016, the Melbourne East Regional Sport and Recreation Strategy, referred to as MERSES, was developed in partnership with 7 Eastern Region councils, including Manningham, Monash, Whitehorse, Knox, Boroondara, Maroondah and Yarra Ranges. These 7 councils were involved based on historical relationships and networks established prior to the creation of state government designated metropolitan partnerships and is not connected to them. The Melbourne East Regional Sport and Recreation Strategy established a coordinated and collaborative approach to sport and recreation planning, and it was thought timely to review and update the strategy. The benefits of updating the strategy include sharing of information about sport and recreation trends and issues, access to statistics from state sporting associations, which can often be difficult to access, regional collaboration, and the use of the document for funding advocacy to state and federal government. Although this is a regional strategy, it is important to note the priority for Boroondara is the provision of facilities for the Boroondara community. In addition, the strategy does not commit Boroondara to any funding obligations. The strategy also details the participation rates of each council involved in the strategy across the Eastern region. And Boroondara has the highest participation rates among those in many sports, including Australian football, basketball, cricket, soccer, gymnastics, tennis, swimming, rugby union and hockey. Officers are seeking endorsement of the Melbourne East Region Sport and Recreation Strategy. Other councils involved are also in the process of seeking endorsement of the strategy, and it is anticipated all 7 Melbourne East Region Sport and Recreation Strategy councils will consider endorsement by the end of 2022. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Franco and Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Is the strategy up for consultation or endorsement by all councils, or are we? Could you just explain how that process is working and whether the other councils have already endorsed the strategy?
There's a mix of where different councils are at. Obviously, given its regional collaboration, it's not something that can be done in isolation of each other. So the position being put to each of the 7 councils is to consider basically whether they'd like to support or endorse the strategy. And it's not a matter of feeding back through changes among the 7 different councils. So the position is basically to consider whether it's appropriate for supporting or not.
And a further question, if I may. And so this will guarantee us a seat in the regional body as well, or council officers' seat?
This is very separate to the state government imposed regional body. This is a group of 7 councils who historically have worked together prior to the state government putting the regional group together. And being part of this strategy and endorsing the strategy would mean we'll continue those historical relationships and keep working with the region on local to the region trends and issues, and joined up advocacy work to state and federal government.
And just finally, are there any potential inconsistencies or obvious consistencies or anything in terms of the state body?
In terms of the state body, can you explain what you mean by that?
Oh, no, to what extent is this consistent with the Victorian government's state position, or it's not necessarily, and the various federations that are identified here?
Yeah, there's no red flags to say that this strategy goes against any Victorian government strategy, but within the sport and recreation area, the strategies are quite common around increasing participation and things that we would be typically supporting anyway. The newest thing we'll need to consider is a change in policy around inclusion and access to facilities, which is a state mandated policy that's coming soon, and we've committed to work with the other councils on sharing information, looking at a regional approach to that. But there's nothing that jumps out as a red flag to say signing up to this contradicts anything the state government has suggested.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. Two questions, if I may. The first is in relation to the Burundara Tennis Centre. And I note that it's called out on page 467 of 503. But I'm just wondering why it's not flagged as an emerging issue on the Burundara page of the strategy.
Well, I suppose the reason it wouldn't be flagged is because in terms of having a regional tennis facility, there will still be one in the region, so it's not a local strategy. Obviously, there's been a lot that's played out through the North East Link, and it wasn't possible for Burundara to retain the centre. But in terms of an overall regional strategy, there'll still be a regional tennis facility in there, and Burundara's tennis needs are catered for at a community level, and we're not necessarily advocating for any regional tennis facilities be based in Burundara.
Thank you.
Yep, you've got another question?
Yeah, I do. I appreciate the response. I think I would prefer to see it called out as an emerging issue for Burundara. There are going to be significant displacement of players across the city from that. But I'll leave it there. My second question is in relation to sports shooting. And the only place that I can find reference to it is in the Yarra Rangers page. And I note that it's not flagged as an issue in any other municipality. I'm wondering whether that is on the agenda for anywhere closer to here to cater for our sports shooters.
It's not from a regional capacity, and this strategy does focus on regional facilities, not facilities for each community. Burundara had some history with having a rifle range down in the Glenferrie area, and they moved on to, I think, a site in Monash where they joined up with other shooting organisations. And it's not necessarily a strategy that dictates a regional facility for every sport or activity. I can't speak for what other councils have done or said, but it hasn't come across in terms of our needs analysis of needing a regional facility in Burundara. And I would say locally, most sports get considered through our local sport and recreation strategy.
Thank you. I'll follow that one up offline, but I was contacted in relation to provision of sports shooting facilities closer than the Yarra Valley, not necessarily in Burundara, but just as part of this regional strategy today. So I'll take that up offline. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. And Councillor Sinfield, you're happy to note for officers to note your comment. You don't seek to, at the first comment about tennis, you don't seek to change anything?
I'm happy to further those discussions offline, and I'm content with the way the report currently reads. That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for officers? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to ask a question which I think Mr. McHugh may have already answered. So by being a part or a partnership of the regional strategic objectives in this strategy, I presume Burundara, along with our neighbouring councils as part of this Eastern Alliance, would be better positioned should there be, whether it be state or federal funding for grants to go towards regional facilities, and whether they be potentially even within Burundara. Have I understood the intent of the policy and the strategy in your comments that we would be better positioned for funding for facilities?
Yeah, potentially. There's most funding applications for sport and recreation funding, particularly from state government, do rely on having references to strategic papers and look kindly on regional collaboration as well. And the strategy does evolve, so if a need emerged, it's not a set and forget strategy, and things can be added as they come up. So it potentially could be advantageous to be part of this group if it was identified as a regional need. Having said that, most of the funding we put in for is related to local community needs as a priority.
Thank you. And my other follow-up question was, I presume there is an in principle agreement that facility standard would be uniform across the regions, and obviously with Boroondara investing considerably in diversity inclusion and renewal of facilities, my understanding is that our neighbouring councils are undergoing the same body of work. Would that be correct?
I would say in principle that would be correct. There may be differences from standards in terms of square meterage provision for sporting pavilions and things like that, but generally the principles are around inclusion and standardisation, albeit it might be different from council to council, but principle would be the same.
Right, thank you. And Madam Mayor, I'd like to foreshadow support of the motion at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, I think that might be now, Councillor Hollingsworth. You're happy to move?
To move the officer recommendation, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Franco, happy to second? Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and seconder, is anyone opposed to that? I can see no one opposed, so we'll return to Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think my questions have probably spoke to the merit of the motion, but I just wanted to close by saying that it's a huge body of work. Very pleased to see Boroondara leading the agenda with this and working with our neighbouring councils. And I support the strategy and commend it to my councillor colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. So as it wasn't opposed, we'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Now, our next item is 7.11, contract number 2019/5A, Enterprise Service Bus Extension. And I believe that's going to be introduced by Jo Truman.
Thank you, Mayor. In introducing this report, I'll just advise that this seeks council endorsement to exercise a second extension of contract number 2019/5A, Enterprise Service Bus, and to make provision for delegation of approval for a third extension if that is required. The Enterprise Service Bus, which is called Boomi, provides integration to support the movement of data between council's core platforms, and it's a key component to supporting council's shift to digital. Boomi is used to transmit information entered by customers in our e-forms to the appropriate system of record, including our property and rating system, our customer relationship management system, and our document and records management system. In October 2018, Council resolved to enter into a 3-year contract with the company that was then called Dell Boomi Australia, now called Boomi Australia, to supply this platform for a total cost of $880,565, which included 3 one-year optional extensions. The first of those extensions was exercised on the 5th of December 2021, and we're now seeking approval from Council to exercise a second extension and to delegate authority to approve the third and final extension to the Direct-to-Customer and Transformation. The extensions are within the terms of the original contract. However, they do require consideration by Council because the value will exceed the original estimated value of the contract by more than 10%. This is because we purchased additional connectors to support the increased use of e-forms across our organisation and by our customers, which require additional integration between the council systems. The cost of the second extension is proposed to be $358,504.37, including GST, which would bring the total contract spend to $1,224,896.20, I think. Please note that expenditure under this contract is in line with Council's 2022-23 adopted budget, and expenditure in future years will be in accordance with the foreshadowed budget allocations as defined in the long-term financial plan. I would also note that Boomi is scheduled to be replaced as part of the Transforming Boroondara program, and the forecast spend I've just mentioned on this contract reflects that transition over the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Truman. Now, Councillor Park, I'm suspecting you had a question. No?
Thank you, Chair. No question, but I do propose to, I foreshadow a motion, and I do propose to move a motion that, whilst similar to the officer's recommendation, varies in that it restricts the exercise of the option only to the second year, and for the third year, it will again need to come back to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Any other questions for officers? Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Mayor. While I fully understand the reasons behind sticking with the same company, they're fulsome. Are we reasonably comfortable that we're getting value for money given the movements in the market?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Gold, we are confident, given that this is a specialised for companies terms, the usually go a comprehensive and full public tender process, and we're confident that that's providing value for.
Thank you.
And Ms. Truman, could I seek any comments in relation to what Councillor Park has suggested?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There's no issue for us to, if required, bring the third extension back to Council next year.
Thank you. Any other questions for officers?
I have a draft.
That potential motion. Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I think we're playing games with the mute button tonight, so my apologies. I'm just wondering the officer's rationale of flagging the capped amount of $500,000 in point 3 of the recommended motion. It seems concerning to me that we would highlight what our upper limit might be when we're yet to receive the invoice for future years and extensions there.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in response to that, we have an estimate based on the current and projected use of Boomi for the integration of forms. These sorts of platforms work on the basis of you get a certain range of use within each of the connectors. And as I mentioned earlier, we have had an increased use, which has required us to purchase additional connectors because we've used additional forms. If we need to use additional forms and continue to develop services for our community by the use of e-forms over that forthcoming period, there might be an additional connector that would be required, which would potentially push it slightly above what is in that anticipated quote. But there are fixed amounts for each of those connectors and the usage on them within the terms of the original, so piece rates, if you will, in the original contract.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Sinfield?
No, I'm uncomfortable with the officer's recommendation and look forward to seeing what Councillor Park is putting forward.
Thank you. Councillor Gillies and then Councillor Stafford.
Thank you, Chair. The question had a two-part to it, but I think the first part might have been included in Councillor Sinfield's question regarding extended funding needs. So the second part of it would be about any anticipations of extended timing to delivery, please.
Thank you, Mayor. At this stage, we're not anticipating any extension to timing. if for any reason that was required, this contract would need to go back to a full tender process in any event, because the contract only provides for these second and third extensions.
Thank you. That answered your question, Councillor Gillies. Yep. And Councillor Stavron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions basically related, but as I understand it from what you've just described, the extension of the cost over the original estimate is due to the increased popularity of form usage by our community. Therefore, we've crossed the threshold. Now, does that mean that going forward, we might have less cost, or we will go to a new threshold and therefore we'll be paying for the amount that we'll be paying given on that basis? That's the first question.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the second part of your statement is correct. So if we reach the threshold, we would need to buy an additional connector, which would push us to the next escalation.
And it's perhaps in the paper, but you mentioned it as well, I think, but I didn't quite understand it. With transforming Boroondara, the need for these Boomi connectors will not be needed in the future. Is that correct? And if so, when would that happen?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. No, that's correct. The Boomi connectors won't be required when we introduce the core systems as part of transforming Boroondara. That is because the Oracle Cloud solution has Oracle Cloud integration, and that will ultimately replace the connectors with Boomi. The first stage of the CRM, which will take a significant portion of this, is due to be delivered towards the latter part of next year.
Thanks for that. And so perhaps to clarify, then perhaps and this Boomi, I guess, technology is there because we're trying to use legacy systems to sort of be up to date. Is that why we're using it?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. And Councillor Franco, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like a bit of an explanation. It states in the report that a key reason for progressing that there are other solutions that are presumably more cost effective on the market available now, but is that correct?
Through you, Mayor. That's probably not quite as straightforward to answer, unfortunately, as I would like it to be. So there are different solutions for integration on the market, but the solution that we have at the moment with Boomi allows us to integrate across a number of our legacy platforms that some of the newer solutions would not support, including platforms that are held on premise rather than in the cloud. So for what we need to do at the moment, it is a solution that is effective and provides us with value for money for what it is. As we move to our more cloud-based solutions through transforming Boroondara, we'll have the sort of commensurate changes in the integration requirements, and therefore the tools available to us will be significantly expanded and simplified. And it's actually inherently inbuilt in the core platform to have that integration gateway there.
That answer your question, Councillor Franco?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now, I can't see any other hands up. So, Councillor Park, you've foreshadowed a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd happily look at the officer's draft if that's able to be put up. I'm happy to move that motion, Chair.
Thank you. And we have a seconder, Councillor Stavron.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now, can we have that taken off the screen so we can just, thank you very much. So is anyone opposed to that motion? The benefit of the mover and the seconder. Councillor Franco?
I'm not opposed. I was trying to read it, so I'd like to be able to read.
Would you like it put back on for a minute?
If you could, yes.
Yep. Thank you. everyone happy that they've read that? Thank you. So I think we can have it down. Thank you. So let's just go back. Is anyone opposed to that motion? I can't see any hands, so we'll go to Councillor Park.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do my best to muster some enthusiasm. I'd much rather us not be spending this money, but unfortunately, it's one of the nuts and bolts things on which we are stuck at having to spend the money. It seems little option and little in the way of cheaper alternatives given the situation we're presently in. So on that basis, acknowledging that we need to do this, I move the motion.
Thank you. So as there was nobody opposed, is everyone happy for me to put the motion? Yep. So we'll put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors, and thanks, Ms. Truman. Now our next item is 7.12, asset management policy, and I think that's going to be introduced by Sean Martin, Manager, Asset and Capital Planning. Thanks, Mr. Martin.
Good evening, councillors, and through you, Madam Mayor. Council adopted its first asset management policy in 2011 and revised and adopted our current policy in 2019. Accordingly, the 29 policy review date is now due, and we present to Council the revised asset management policy 2022. Councillors will recall in July of this year that they adopted Boroondara's first asset management plan. The asset plan, combined with the asset management policy, asset management strategy, and other operational plans like the road management plan, form Council's asset management framework. When developing the asset management plan, we engage with the community, and this engagement informed the asset plan, which includes definitions of the asset management framework and the core principles of the asset management policy. The purpose of the asset management policy is to guide the sustainable management of Council's assets to support services and ensure assets meet the current and future needs of the Boroondara community. The policy defines the roles and responsibilities regarding assets and guides councils and its officers in the creation, operation, maintenance, upgrade, renewal, and rationalisation of council's assets for the delivery of council's services. In developing the revised policy, we have considered ISO standard, asset management standards, international infrastructure management standards, and the national asset management framework standards. We have also consulted with the other council departments which are represented in the asset management steering group. Our review has aligned the policy to support the mission and vision of the Boroondara Community Plan 21 to 2031 and conform with the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020. We recommend that Council resolve to adopt the Asset Management Policy 2022 as found in the Council report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So, yep, we're just getting it taken off the screen. Thank you. So, any questions for Mr. Martin? Councillor Franco, and then we've got Councillor Biggar.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Is there any reason why we're not proposing community consultation on the strategy? And I note that it's technical, but there are many members of our community who have a technical engineering background who have a strong interest in asset management and our practices.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Franco. As we went to the community with the asset plan and the framework as defined within the asset plan, we engaged heavily on the asset plan, and then thus we included the framework, which the policy is part of. And then we define within the plan the key principles or the asset management principles as found within the policy. So we felt that we've engaged with the community with the plan, and we felt that that was probably enough.
And can I, in terms of determining our program for works as they're selected, how does the policy sit in relation to the plan, and how, if I'm reading this correctly, the decisions are made by the executive leadership team, is that correct?
No, so the principles of the policy, the main principles of the policy. So the first principle is service levels, defining service levels. So I guess our key document that or contract that we have with the community is the Boroondara Community Plan. So that sets out the services that we're going to provide to the community. Those services are obviously supported by our infrastructure. So that's where our service levels come into it. We then, the second principle that we talk about is ensuring that those services are fit for now and for the longer term. So, and that's addressed through upgrades and new assets, those sorts of things. So we're looking at not just now, but how it will be in the future. The third thing that we look at is assets. The core principle is assets over a life cycle. So we look at, will they be fit for purpose over the life cycle of the asset? And then we look into, we ensure that we look at risks, so climate change, those sorts of things. So we address those. And then the final thing that we are looking at is ensuring that we're doing this within the financial plan, within our 10-year financial plan. So if I bring that back to our assets, all of our assets and our asset plan is defined off these principles. So we address all of those things within an asset plan for an individual asset group. So this overarching document defines how we look at all of our assets, how we treat them, when we would renew them, when we would inspect them, those sorts of things. So that core principles, that's the overarching document that we're looking at.
Another question?
Yes, sorry, I'm just checking if I'm on mute. I've received numerous representations from members of the community arguing, and this is probably a good thing to be put to us, that we're being too excessive in the level of maintenance being too high in relation to some assets, for example, in certain roads. And that's been put to me that we're perhaps investing too much. Now, better to be accused of investing too much than too little. I don't dispute that. But at what point do we get that transparency with all these policies, how they relate to the asset management and the actual areas where we invest and that decision, and how do we achieve transparency in relation to that?
Thank you for your question, and through you, Madam Mayor. So this policy doesn't define those financial amounts and where we spend, but certainly the asset plan that we passed in the middle of the year, it talks to maintenance budget, it talks to renewal budgets, it talks to new and upgrade budgets for the defined asset groups. So that's where we would define and tie that in with the long-term financial plan within the asset plan, which is part of the overall framework.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Biggar, you had a question?
I did, thank you. Actually, a couple, but several of them have been covered by Councillor Franco. The only thing that was remaining is really just to understand the timing of this. It looks like of the review, we had 2011 was the first one, and then reviewed in 2019, and now this is still 2022, and we are reviewing it in 2026. So is it going to be reviewed on a 4-year cycle from now on? Is that the intention? Or maybe there was one I missed in between there.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Biggar, and through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's reviewed on a 4-yearly basis, and we will review again in 2026. There was a review also in 2014.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. My question relates to the use of the word sustainable and its variations within the report. It's a little ambiguous to me as to whether sustainable in various different places throughout the policy document mean able to longevity in a sustainable way that council is able to sustain this policy, as opposed to environmental sustainability and various other considerations surrounding that. It would be my preference that in the policy aim component of this piece, that be more clearly articulated to make sure that our community understands that there is a balance, as you spoke to, between environmental sustainability and service delivery standards and needs and expectations of the community. I'm happy to let officers consider that offline, and I don't seek to change the content of the policy tonight. But I'm just concerned, I suppose, that is a little bit ambiguous in the way that it is articulated in the report. Sorry, that was more of a statement than a question, Mayor.
Is there a question about whether they're able to change a few words to satisfy your desires?
In hindsight, I should have probably discussed this with officers prior to tonight's meeting, but it was just on my mind as I read through the definitions section there. Officers might like to consider whether there is an opportunity to, under delegation, just provide some clarity there rather than bringing it back to the chamber. Apologies.
Mr. Freer, I think you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps if I can just make a quick comment in relation to it. It is much more about sustaining in terms of asset management, not in an environmental sustainability sense. So from a perspective of sustaining the asset for its life cycle, in that regard, is and I guess particularly in relation to cost and renewal as well.
So would it be reasonable for officers to take that on board and just change a few words, and are we happy as a group to support what's here on that proviso? Maybe Mr. Freer, is that something that you believe could be done? Yep. Okay.
I'll follow it up with an email, Mayor, to Mr. Freer offline, and just make sure that from an environmental sustainability perspective, obviously having a higher quality, well-maintained asset is better for environmental sustainability. It's not seeking to change any other, any part of the policy, just to be clear there.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Can't see any, so I think we're in search of a motion. Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
And Councillor Biggar, you're happy to second that? Now, is there anyone opposed to that? I can't see any hands. So, Councillor Sinfield, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I'm not sure that much needs to be said. It's more of a compliance piece to make sure that we comply with the new Act and the requirements and revisit this periodically. So I'm happy with the officer's work here. It's probably the briefest policy that we have at the city, but I think it encompasses the other plans that sit beneath it, and I commend it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as there's no one opposed, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Martin. So that takes us to the end of these reports, I believe. I think we've done all the ones that we flagged. So our next item is general business. We do have an item of general business that Councillors Watson, Stavrou and Biggar and Thompson have requests for leave of absence. Now, I think Councillor Stavrou and Councillor Bigger, you needed to declare a conflict of interest in this. If they leave, are we still going to have quorum? Just? Yes.
Through you. Yes, we will, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So maybe we'll take you two offline for the moment.
Am I being taken off or should I take
I
myself
believe
off?
so. I think so. We're working on it. Yep. Yep. Okay. So, could we have the proposed motion up on the screen? Or maybe I'll read it out. It's quite long. I don't know if it'll all fit. I might read it out. So, so there are 4 requests. One is for a retrospective leave of absence from Councillor Watson for 1 November until 5 December 2022 inclusive. The next one is for a retrospective leave of absence from Councillor Stavrou for 1 November until 26 November 2022 inclusive. The third one is a retrospective leave of absence from Councillor Bigger for Monday, 14 November. And the fourth one is for a leave of absence from Councillor Thompson for tonight, Monday, 28 November 2022. Now, are we happy to consider these together? Councillor Sinfield, you're happy to move that?
I am.
And Councillor Park to second?
No, I'm not happy considering them together.
Okay. Well, let's separate them. It'll just take a little bit longer.
Well, Chair, with respect, the motion's been moved.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. So
I have some questions in relation to the motions that are being put before us.
Okay, well, let's allow those questions.
Okay, could we be advised when Councillor Watson applied for leave of absence and Councillor Stavrou? And to whom?
I think well, certainly to Mr. Storer, and I believe I knew about it. Mr. Storer, are you able to clarify that? Or maybe Mr. Wee?
Chair, could I just make the point that the question's utterly irrelevant to the consideration of the motion. When a request is made by a councillor for leave, regardless of when it's considered in the chamber, the Act is very clear that council can't unreasonably withhold that consent.
Well, I'll put a different view. We were advised that Councillor Watson and Councillor Stavrou would be participating in council meetings and in council activities through the election period. We now find that there's a retrospective request for leave of absence, and it would be good to have an explanation and transparency for our colleagues, for members of the public, because there hasn't been any. And if the practice is to continue this degree of obfuscation, well, then that's the practice of this council. I think it should come to a halt.
So look, I've been advised that Councillor Park is essentially correct, that we really don't need to consider all of this, that it's simply a request for leave of absence. So we now have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Franco, you're proposing the motion, I'm assuming?
It's going to be all one in motion, is it?
Yes. So we'll go to the mover. I think that was Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to move that, and I'm happy to move them all together. For Councillor Franco's reference, it may assist him. His emails dated Monday, the 21st of November, when the leave request and intention was communicated in an email addressed directly to Councillor Franco and copied into the rest of the council, and it's quite clear in that. So I request that that motion now be put.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder that the motion be put? Yes, so thank you. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. And those against? Are you abstaining, Councillor Franco?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that motion is carried, and if we can note that Councillor Franco abstained. Thank you very much, everyone. So we'll now perhaps bring the two back. Is everyone back? Councillor Stavro is not here yet.
He is now.
Good. Okay, fantastic. So councillors, are there any other items of general business? No items of urgent business? Councillor Franco.
Item of general business, if I may.
Yep, let's go back.
Thank you. I'd just like to make the point that I've received a number of representations from members of the community in relation to the state of our park maintenance in different locations in the municipality, around different parks and gardens, and the growth post-COVID, where there was an expectation that the maintenance levels would have improved. But I'd just like to note that I've received such representations, and I'd welcome any feedback from council management in relation to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freer, are you in a position to respond now?
Yes, I can indeed, Madam Mayor. Thank you. And through you, Councillor Franco, we're aware of the challenges that we've had particularly in mowing in our open space areas. Council has something close to 500 open space areas that it mows, and it has had difficulty in the persistent rain and the waterlogged soil and state of parks to put on mechanical mowing equipment of weight. We recently commenced a social media campaign to advise the community of the issues that we're experiencing, and as part of that, if it hasn't been released as yet, but some photographic evidence of one of our 3-ton mowers bogged in a park attempting to get out there and mow at the moment. So we're having some difficulties getting around the city in that respect, but I can say that certainly we are making attempts to mow as much as we can at this point in time, and with the weather forecast this week, we expect that we'll get back to a normal situation pretty quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. Any other items of general business? Thank you. Items of urgent business? No. Confidential business. So we do have an item of confidential business to consider. So I'm seeking a motion to close the meeting to the public in accordance with section 66(2)(a) and section 3.1 of the Local Government Act 2020. And there are some suggested words for the motion. I might just quickly read them out. So the motion is that in accordance with section 66(1) and 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to members of the public for the consideration of confidential items. This is confidential information for the purposes of Section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020. A, because it is private commercial information, being information provided by a business, commercial or financial undertaking, Section 3(1)(g). And B, this ground applies because the agenda item contains the commercial information of a private business whereby the release would expose said business to disadvantage. So, Councillor Gillies, I think you had your hand up. Are you happy to move that? Yep. And seconded, Councillor Sinfield. Thank you. So, is anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? So that motion is carried. Thank you. So we're about to close the meeting. So to members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, the live stream will cease while the confidential business is being discussed, and we will reopen the meeting to the public at the conclusion of the discussion. So thank you. Motion to reopen the council meeting to the public. Councillor Galt and seconded Councillor Gillies. All those in favour? So that's carried. Thank you. Having opened the meeting, again, community members, we're now ready to close the meeting because we've concluded today's business. So thank you everyone for joining us, and please stay safe, and we look forward to you joining us again. So thank you everyone.